Welcome to the SRS Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron J. Babyar, and I'm the Training Director of Support Raising Solutions. Whether you're a new ministry worker or a veteran looking to increase your competence and confidence, Support Raising Solutions seeks to bless you in your quest to be a spiritually healthy, vision-driven, fully funded Great Commission worker. My guest today, once again, is Jamie Suel, and I'm thrilled to have Jamie back. And we are doing an on-again, off-again series on being spiritually healthy, which truly is the most important part of raising support and getting fully funded and staying fully funded. So, Jamie, my friend, welcome back to the SRS Podcast.
Thanks, Aaron. Good to be here.
So, of course, at the time that we're recording this, we're doing it in advance. We're doing this we are in early-ish 2021, but this will be releasing more towards end of the summer or the fall. And so we're kind of spreading this out. But I know we've shared in the past a little bit about your family and you're in College Station and different things like that. But I would love to hear, what does your family typically do in autumn, in the fall? And I know that can be different, and life changes, and you've lived in different countries and things like that. But as the school year changes, what does that usually look like for the Suel family?
Yeah. Well, we used to have daughters that play volleyball, but this year it'll just be my one daughter who will be playing volleyball. So it's full of a lot of volleyball games, and that's so much fun. Love watching our girls play volleyball. We also do some traveling usually in the fall. Fall is typically a conference season. And so there's always trainings and things like that to do. That's
just good stuff like that.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Well, listen, I know that this November we have what's called the Support Raising Leaders Conference. And that is for people that, either they set the organization kind of rhythm when it comes to support raising. Sometimes though we get CEOs and CFOs and COOs, but we also get support raising coaches. Yeah. And also we get people that sometimes are more in the member care kind of things, because they're realizing the money issue that sometimes that contributes really heavily to how people are feeling about life and ministries. A little bit, a lot of it. So I don't know if you're going to be able to be at this one in November in Orlando in 2021, but I know you've gone to them in the past. So what would you say to the people that are in some way, shape, or form, they're in charge of member care but also they relate to support raising? Why would you encourage them to check out that conference?
Okay, I hate to correct you, but I've never been to one. My husband has been to one.
Really? Okay, let's pause that. I could have swore. Yeah, you were at one?
No.
I sat with you in Orlando at one.
No.
We had lunch.
No, that was at Mission Nexus. Wasn't it?
That was Mission Nexus? Oh, you know what? Here's my problem. Yeah, I've had too many conferences at the same hotel.
Yes.
That was Mission Nexus. Okay.
Yeah. So Chris is gone.
Let's skip that. Let's pretend I asked you.
Okay.
Let's pretend you were there. I said it wrong. I don't think that's a big deal. But go ahead and answer the question just from the standpoint of why it might be good, and maybe even want to throw in a couple of things that Chris said that you thought would be good. And if it's a terrible question and we need to erase that, we can't.
Okay.
Because I was realizing this is going to be listened to at a time when people might be registering.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the support raising leaders, I always butcher this, SRLC.
Support Raising Leaders Conference. I already asked the question, so I'll ask it to you again so you can answer. Okay. Why would somebody who's more member care, what would they benefit from being a part of that conference?
Yeah, I think just anytime you get a chance to realign, and get back into that why, it's just so helpful. And, you lead people where you have been, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's so good to get, I love conferences because of the networking, the relationships you build, and as well as the growth that you experience personally. It's just always good to realign and
I know that sometimes Not sometimes. I've heard this many times. In fact, it was kind of how Steve Shadrack roped me into partnering with SRS back in the day. But part of the reason was because he actually said, "Aaron, do you realize this is probably the most felt need
Mm,
among missionaries?" And I went,
mm,
"Whoa," because I
yeah.
care a lot about equipping
Yeah.
ministry leaders, but I never thought through why finances. It's a boy. It's a hot button. It's
Yeah.
always a hot button. Um, and so, yeah, that conference, for those that might be interested, you can find out more about it on the Support Raising Solutions website. But it is in Orlando. It will be live and in person. And we're really excited to do it November. I think off the top of my head, I'm not looking at the calendar. I want to say it's November 7, 8, 9, or 8, 9, 10, or I know I should know that, but I don't. That's many days away
Yeah.
from the time
Yeah.
I'm recording this. So
Yeah. Your calendar's holding that information for you.
exactly. All right. So anyway, all that being said, I know that today, Jamie, we wanted to kind of lean in on community, and you just said something about that. Even in regard to conferences, sometimes we
Yeah.
find our community outside of our community. Like we
Mm,
find people that are wrestling with and thinking about and
yeah.
struggling with the same things that we are outside of our ministry organization, and that's really encouraging.
Yeah. Yeah.
But sometimes, in fact, oftentimes, we can't live in the conference world.
Mhm.
I have many friends across, well, the globe, really, that I've met at conferences. But then there's the people that I deal with on a more regular basis. I say deal with because they're my community. They might be my
Mm,
friends. They might just be people I know. They might be people I just work with. I mean, I kind of want to be friends with everybody because of my personality, but that doesn't
mm.
always work, and that's okay. But when it comes to community, that is something that affects us in our spiritual health, doesn't it, Jamie?
Absolutely. Yeah, that verse in Proverbs 18:1 says, "A man who isolates himself seeks his own desires. He rages against all wise judgment." I
Mm,
just think there's something really to that. You look at like Jesus and his disciples, and um, you know, especially the story that really comes to mind for me is the story of Moses with Aaron and Hur, and when they're fighting the battle in Exodus 17, and how when Moses' hands were heavy, they would come alongside him and raise up his arms. Um,
mm.
I think you have some connection with that story, don't you?
Yeah, very much, very much. Well, first of all, let me back up. When you said that Proverbs 18:1, a man who
Mm,
isolates himself seeks his own desires, he rages
yeah.
against all wise judgment. Um, I certainly wouldn't apologize for, being born where I was born or being raised where I was raised. We can't affect that. And I do love, the USA and America, but it has its own issues. And I don't
Hmm.
think that's a surprise for anybody. But one of the things, at least in my life, that I think I had to learn to find some balance in was this kind of rugged isolationism that was kind of
Yeah.
I don't know, kind of held up as a gold standard, so to
Right.
speak. And sometimes people call it John Wayne syndrome.
Yeah. Yeah.
And John Wayne was like a famous Hollywood actor. But I actually grew up not far from where he grew up. I grew up in Indianola, Iowa, which is kind
Okay.
of like from an Iowa standpoint, the next big city north of Winterset, Iowa. So like his where he was born, his house, all that stuff. Like
Yeah.
that's literally from my neck of the woods, or I
Yeah.
guess in that stage, I'd say the neck of the cornfields. But yeah, over time, I began to realize, hey, this whole do it all myself, and
Yeah.
um, that really has its limits.
Hmm.
And when I was in ministry, early in my vocational ministry career, yeah, Jamie, I really went through some difficult stuff that I thought I needed to have all the answers
Yeah.
and um, not be my own savior. I won't go that far, but just figure it out and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And well, I was lost. I was hurting, and I say all that to say you asked me a question about that Exodus
Yeah.
verse.
Yeah.
Moses' hands were heavy, and Aaron and Hur, they came alongside him. They supported his hands, one on each side, and they helped him steady his hands until the sun set and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That verse was very, very, I think, enlightening to me.
Hmm.
Once somebody did come alongside and really helped walk me through a difficult ministry season, where I began to realize, man, who does that? for
Yeah.
ministry leaders. Who fills their cup? Who pours in to them? And
Yeah.
had it not been for a different ministry leader that was kind of looking out for me, so to speak, I honestly don't know that I'd still be in ministry all these
Wow.
years later.
Wow.
And so even when Marky and I were starting Exago Ministries, which of course we partner with Support Raising Solutions and have now for years, since like
Yeah.
2013, 2014, when we were starting Exago, that verse that you just brought up,
Yeah.
that was very much a real influencer of, hey, how do we come alongside? How do we encourage? How do
Mm.
we hold up the hands? How do we love
Yeah.
on missionary types
Yeah.
so that they don't burn out and quit and give up and get out of ministry?
Yes.
Anyway, so yeah. No, thanks for asking. That's that's all too common. It's all too
Yes.
familiar. And isolation, the John Wayne syndrome, whatever you want to call it. Jamie, have you ever seen that go really well for anybody in ministry?
No, I haven't, surprisingly.
Right? Yeah, it crashes
Oh,
and burns, doesn't it?
yeah. Can I ask you what in that relationship, that special relationship that God allowed you to have, that
Yeah.
someone who came alongside you, what were some of the things that person did that felt like holding up your hands?
Mm. Well, number one, I was in a season due to changes. I was working with a local church in the Detroit area.
Uh-huh.
I was in a season where the senior pastor had left, and he was a good guy. In fact, we're still friends to this day.
Mm.
But when he left, there was a vacuum of leadership. There really was. What little leadership that remained in the church was poor or dysfunctional, and so I was building. I was a youth pastor. I was building a youth ministry, and I wouldn't say things were going perfectly, but they were going very well. We're seeing a lot of teenagers give their lives to Christ and get discipled, and
Mm.
getting to a point where they were sharing with their friends who were coming to know the Lord, and it was a
Cool.
high water moment in
Yeah.
a lot of ways. I don't think numbers are often a great indicator of how healthy a youth group is. But in that case, yeah, our numbers doubled, tripled, quadrupled. Like they kept growing, and it wasn't because of a program. It was scripture. It was a relationship. It was life. It was discipleship. And you would have thought, wow, hey, that church they would have been loving you. And I got the exact opposite.
Wow.
In fact, I had a
Wow.
member of the board. There was a problem in the church, and when I tried to fix it, or I tried to get help from the board and said, hey, we really need to address this. And they're like, no. And I was like,
Ooh.
hey, no, this is a problem. We can't just say nope. Like, we need to acknowledge.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was actually said to me, and this doesn't sound, this doesn't even sound real, but it was actually said to me, yeah, we know that's a problem. You're just not a very good leader. And you should have
Okay.
saw this problem before you went and grew the youth group up so big.
Oh.
And so if you're going to be a good leader, you have to figure out how to fix this all by yourself. We're not helping you.
Wow. Okay.
Um,
That must have felt really good.
oh, that hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And we were struggling we had so many kids meeting in the space that we had girls sitting on boys' laps when we were trying to do Bible study because there's nowhere else to sit. And let me tell you, Jamie, that doesn't work.
It's a little distracting.
It was so distracting. And we were genuinely trying to do Bible study, and there wasn't physical places to put people because we had a wonderful problem of too many teenagers showing up. And
Wow.
man, that was, I felt so alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was told I was being a bad leader. And,
Wow.
and also I was struggling with, I was feeling like I was failing my family because, and I don't want to say the church didn't pay me. They paid me, but there was such a struggle financially with where we lived and the cost of living and stuff like that, that we were having a difficult time buying diapers.
Yeah.
And buying formula. And so I was very worried about the health of our firstborn.
Yeah.
And I was working really hard. I was working a lot of hours. I was also finishing seminary at the time. So there was like a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
And I just remember this guy reached out to me, and he didn't have to. So back to your original question. So what happened? How did he lift you up? He was just a guy at a different church in the area. I had met him at a youth leader network, and he just reached out to me and took me out to coffee. He called and said, hey, can I take you to coffee, or can I take you to lunch? I don't remember which it was. And, I don't I was in this weird spot where I was always the leader. I was always the one who
Yeah.
was reaching out. And it
Yeah.
was so different to have somebody go, "Hey, I just want to see how you're doing. Can I take you to lunch?" Like that hadn't
Wow.
happened
Yeah.
in years. By the way, I need to mention this guy's name is Kevin Parkin. If anybody knows him that lives in the Detroit area, Kevin is still involved in coaching and leadership, and just a man that threw me a line at a
Yeah.
desperate time. And but anyway,
Yeah.
first of all, he reached out. Secondly, when we did go out,
Hmm.
he actually asked me how I was doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody had asked me that, at least from the church.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
really, probably since it'd probably been a year.
Yeah.
And so that was so foreign. And I'm not a big crier, Jamie. Now, as I grow more in love
Mhm.
with Jesus over time, my heart has become softer and I'm more of a crier
Yeah.
now. But back
Yeah.
then, John Wayne syndrome, I wasn't a
Yeah.
crier.
Right.
And dude, I wept.
Yeah.
And all I did is he asked me how I was doing.
Yeah. He
And I
saw you.
wept. Yeah, he
Yeah.
saw me.
Yeah.
And he loved on me. He encouraged me. He asked permission to give me some sage advice. And boy, did he
Mm.
bring it. He brought some great advice. He gave me perspective. And if you were to ask him, he probably doesn't even remember the meeting.
Yeah.
Because I
Part
actually
of
did
who he is.
several years later. I looked him up and he probably didn't remember the meeting.
Yeah.
But he was just aware that there was a fellow minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ that was hurting.
Yeah.
And it was naive, truth be told, and he was right. Like he told me a couple of things that were hard to hear. He was like, you do realize this church isn't going to, like, they're not going to have a youth pastor 6 months from now. You can do
Mm.
everything perfect. They're getting rid of you. They're getting rid of the position. You do realize that's what's going on. I was like, huh? What? No,
Mm.
everything's going great. And he's like, yeah, wake up, kid.
Wow. Yeah.
He was nice about it. He was loving about it. But so I think, I hate this. You're somebody I'm interviewing. You're getting my story here. It's supposed to be the other way
No,
around.
it's so good though. Like
It's yeah.
what I'm hearing is that like he reached out, he asked you how you were, so he saw you. I imagine that he did a lot of listening that day, and then once you had shared and had that time, then he gave you perspective and advice. But just like if you think about those points that he saw you, um, he grew, like came to know you a little more.
Mm,
He just loved you, and that he reflected Christ to you. He was a reflection of Christ during a season that was really hard.
yeah.
And I think that's one of the most important aspects of community. I think that's, Jesus talks about, like confess your sins one to each other. It's not just like so you can it's so much deeper than just the act of confessing your sins. It's being in that relationship with someone where a trusted relationship where when you say the thing, they're going to look at you with the eyes of Jesus,
Mm,
and reflect his love back to you. And that's so important in our lives, and especially in a season of support raising when the lies are coming hot and heavy, you know?
hmm hmm There's a challenge, and I'm not throwing shade, but I'm going to push on you for just a second here because
Okay, do
doing
it.
what I do, I sometimes hear about people that they almost feel like they need to isolate when they're raising
Mm.
support because their community doesn't understand the biblical reasons that they can raise support.
Yeah, yeah,
Their family might not be encouraging. They might be
yeah,
like, "Don't you be a beggar?" Like they don't get it.
yeah.
Um, and so there's a challenge there where like I really want people to have healthy community, but also
Hmm.
sometimes and I've known a few people like this. They really had to study and pray and look at the
Hmm.
Bible and read the God Ask and talk to people they didn't even know to get some sense of community from others that had raised
Yeah,
support because the people in their most immediate community are telling them they shouldn't be doing it, even though
yeah.
they feel like, no, this is what I need to do. So
Hmm.
my family ministry can thrive, I need to get full funding, but my own organization is treating me like I'm not working, even though
Yeah,
I'm working like 50, 60 hours a week. So there's a rub there, Jamie, and I need you to
yeah.
solve it in a sentence
Okay, let
or
me just
less.
do
Go ahead.
that. Yeah. We just, I know this is a conversation, remember? No, as you were speaking, I was like, absolutely. That I think that there are those times. And so like my thoughts were going, so who is that? How do you ask that question? And of course, oh my goodness, at the very core of it is our true community, and that's Christ, right? He is the friend that sticks closer than a brother, the one who never leaves or forsakes us. He's the one that, if we're thrown in prison, he is always with us. It's like
Yeah.
he never leaves us, and he is our deepest and truest community. And
Amen.
so like that has to be where we start. And then I think there also, there can be kind of, I would call it peripheral community. And that's like what you're saying. Like for me, listening to podcasts, these podcasts have been super helpful to during a season of like some support raising for us. And
Oh, wait a minute. You're talking about other podcast episodes outside of this series?
yes. Oh,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because you're experiencing the testimony of community, right? Of people who've done this and are doing it. And, during seasons of support raising, I often will pick up the God Ask or put it on my audiobook and listen to it, or, different books and use them in chunks. So that's like, it's a type of community. So there's also this sense of like peripheral community, like community that is supports that you put in place that may not be actual friends or people that you live with on a daily basis, but things like these podcasts, not just this series, the spiritual health series, but the SRS support raising podcast. There's so much community there because you're listening to other people who are in it or have been there, or it's a type of community.
Even if you don't know everybody,
exactly.
there are people that are walking in some of the same exact footprints you are.
Exactly. And they're like mentors, and fellow journeymen. And so, books that have been written, like the God Ask, there's so many books out there that can be helpful and to read in chunks and just to keep it like, okay, I'm not alone in this. I'm not the only one. I've heard you mention finding other people who are going through support raising seasons and working together, meeting together, doing some group coaching together. That's a great way to have some community during this season.
Yeah.
Because they are also focused on being spiritually healthy, vision driven, and fully funded by the grace of God. Mm-hmm. And then I would say, I know that there can be times when we do experience some opposition in our circles, and I would just say, really being prayerful about that, and also being willing to take some risks in that, and to have a deeper conversation with some people that maybe get it. Maybe they're on your team already.
Good word. I wouldn't say this is like the common thing that happens all the time, but I have heard of more than one person for sure that they were spiritually healthy. I think they were trying to do some sort of healthy community.
Yeah.
But their actual parents were against them raising support, and their parents didn't even really know Jesus, and may have even said something very, very specifically like, "You will not do this, and you will not talk to my friends, and I forbid," or whatever the words might be. But where these young men or young women have been respectful and graceful to their parents, and in a very kind way said, I am going to do this, but please, it's not in rebellion to you. It's in obedience to what I believe our Creator has called me to do. And so, like, I want to love you and respect you, but also I'm not going to not do something that I believe God's led me to do. And it's really helped, I guess, certain relationships. In fact, I've even heard of unbelieving parents that have come to Christ partially because of the testimony of their adult son or daughter that respectfully disobeyed them and raised support. Like, that was a big part of what caused them to pause and go, wait a minute, she believes that much in this? What does she know about God that we don't know? So again, I don't want to promise that for everyone, but at least, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but I got to think that those young men and women that have been through something like that, they were finding some sort of other community that was affirming them, that was walking with them, that was helping them, even indirectly, because that feel pretty lonely, maybe even scary
Mm-hmm.
for some people to have their
Yeah.
parents be in such opposition
Yeah.
to being spiritually healthy, vision driven, fully funded, you know?
Yeah. That's such a good word, because it goes back to that the first community that we have is with Christ, and even His Word, His Spirit, and it's being obedient to Him and understanding that there will be times that we will feel alone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it's going back to that he who isolates himself, is seeking his own desires.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there is a difference in that loneliness that God is using to draw you deeper to Him, and choosing loneliness, like just assuming that people aren't going to want to hear it from me, or that they don't. There's a difference,
Right.
rather. But I loved hearing that testimony. You're right. It's not the testimony of everyone, but the testimony was obedience to Christ, and counting Him as more precious than any loneliness or suffering that
Yeah.
we could.
Yeah. And more precious than even our human
Mm,
relationships. Now,
yeah.
I do, I'm going to jump off on a sidetrack here real quick.
Okay.
For those of you that are married, the listeners that are married, I, boy, there needs to be a peace in your home if you're going to
Yeah.
raise support between you and your spouse. And
Yeah.
whether that's, they at least agree to read the God ask.
Mm,
Even if they're in opposition, maybe you submit and just say, hey, read the God ask. Let's talk about it. Or maybe read the God ask and go to the boot camp with me. And
mm,
if you are convinced I shouldn't do this afterwards, I won't do it.
mm.
Or I think that's a little different than,
Yeah.
well, Steve Shadrach said it, so I'm doing it, honey.
Mhm.
Ooh, yeah, hey, come on
Yeah.
now. I do think support raising it is a journey. And
Yeah.
if we're married, our spouses to some degree need to be on that journey with us, even if it's not quote unquote their job or their role or whatever else. Don't break community with your spouse,
Yeah.
because you're one under the Lord once you're married. So just
Yeah.
kind of a warning there for people that are married. It might be it's a real struggle.
Mm.
It's a real struggle if your organization and or you're saying you need to raise support, and if that's causing a lot of hardship in your marriage, root that out, seek that out, love your way through it. It might take you a bit longer to kind of get there, but invest in your spouse.
Yeah.
And invite them, like I said, to read the God ask, or invite them or to go to the boot camp with you. That doesn't mean they have to do it, but hopefully
Yeah.
they'll give you the respect of doing some of that work, to at least quote unquote be on your team, even if they're not doing the support raising. That
Yeah.
would be my encouragement. Jamie, you've probably
Wow, that's good
counseled
word.
as many or more married couples than I have. And any you probably have some better ideas. Anything to add to that?
Gosh, no, that was such a good word. Such a good word. And I think it just goes back to the attitude of our heart, that in any of this, like you said, it's a journey. But, support raising is not the thing, right? The thing is our relationship with the Lord and our obedience to Him. And so, in whatever we're doing in our support raising, in our marriages, that we are seeking to honor the Lord and to walk with Him in His ways. And so, I think it just goes back to the attitude of the heart, like praying diligently and daily for your spouse in this journey with a humble heart. And
Mm.
also, God, what is it that you're wanting to teach me and to do in me through this conflict, or this disagreement, or this situation where we're not in alignment, and help me to adjust. Because again, the thing is about being conformed to the image of Christ, and loving Him. And this is what God's using in your life right now.
Yep. It's not an accident that you are where you are.
Right. Right.
So, All right. Well, we're not ready to wrap up yet, but I know we're getting towards the end of this particular episode. You had mentioned something about a PVC pipe analogy. I want to hear that. What were you talking about? That you shot that in a message to me. I want to hear about the PVC pipe. What's going on there?
Yeah, it's actually my friend Leah. She's kind of a mentor in my life, a coach. She's got this analogy about how our lives are like this PVC pipe kind of thing, where you think about like the vine, right? That Jesus says that I am the vine, you're the branches. If a man remains in me and I in him, he'll bear much fruit. And just thinking about if I'm one, the way she describes it is like if I'm one like the top part of the PVC pipe cylinder, right? I'm one half. What is it? Circumference. I'm one half of the circumference, and they're the other half. The other person is.
Okay. I'll just trust you on this one.
I know. Listen, and so we together kind of create this conduit for the Lord, and if we are only focused on the other person, like we're looking to that person to be that to be our everything or whatever, then we are going to miss out on being the true conduit. But it's when we are joined together and creating that that flow, when we're both eyes fixed on the Lord, that there's a flow that happens, and it's us working in tandem with the Lord. I probably butchered that because she explains it different, but anyway.
The idea is there, though.
You can edit that out if you want.
We'll leave it in there. That's good stuff. Good stuff.
It's looking to the one who blesses, not looking to others to be the blessing. You know what I'm saying? Like not looking to them or the support, but looking to the one who is the giver of all good things.
Yeah. And when we're going to be in community, we got to have that perspective because hey, just facts. As humans, we'll let each other down.
Yes,
it's going to happen. It's not an if; it's a when. It's going to happen.
So true. Yes.
I am certain that I have let down some of my friends, and I might have meant to, but I'm just sure it happens. And I know some of them have let me down. In fact, I have a list. I brought it. No, I'm just kidding. But like it happens, right? And so, we need to have that balance on seeking Christ first in our community and realizing that God is our community. But then also, we want people around us that are human beings that we're not so isolated that all we're doing is raising support and that's it for 3 months or 6 months or whatever else. That there has to be a balance there. So let's end with that. In fact, let's talk about for people that are raising support or they need to for a significant season. Maybe it's a month, maybe it's 2, maybe it's 6 because they're just getting started and they don't even know what they're getting into and they're just like powering through all these episodes. What happens community wise? How would a support raiser possibly, what would be a healthy way that they could communicate with their friends that like, hey, I'm about to put my head down into a support raising season. Things are going to be different for us. What would you say to that?
Yeah, man, as you were saying that, I was just thinking about, communicate early and often. I think even taking some time with the Lord to kind of write that out, journal it all out and what you would want to say to these friends. I think, reassuring them of your love, explaining to them the season that you're entering, the commitment that you're making, and how you realize that you it's the intent versus impact. My intention is not to hurt, wound, or cause break in our fellowship. I value your friendship, and I recognize that I'm going into this season where I'm going to have to be super focused. And so, would you give me grace and also speak the truth to me? Like if there is something that I've hurt you in, would you come to me? I invite you to do that. I invite you to speak into my life. And and just setting out those expectations and communicating clearly, because it becomes this kind of, and it necessarily so becomes kind of this, it's your job, right? It becomes your focus during this major focus during this season. And so, but inviting those people who are close to you and letting them know what's coming, and that you want to love them well, but it might look a little different for a season. And so would they I think just communicating early, and then that invitation for them to speak into your life, and understanding that, like, just because someone says something, we all, like you said, we all make mistakes.
They might not join your team. They might think what you're doing is silly. They're still your friend, but they just don't get it. So you can communicate what you're doing, and they may or may not understand. But also, they're probably not going to permanently unfriend you if you're a little too busy for a season, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say too, it's important, the spiritually healthy thing. It's hard when you invite your bestie to join your team and they're just not there.
Yeah.
So I would say don't invite your best friend to join your team unless you're completely at peace that they just might say no.
Yeah.
And you need to be okay with that, I think, before you set them down. Otherwise it can seem coercive or pressure-like, or you want to hurt the friendship, have an expectation that they will join your team at a certain amount that you have decided for them. That's kind of a kiss of death, perhaps, for some relationships. So be really careful about that.
That's so good, because it goes back to like square one, right? It's not our job to coerce people onto our team. It's our job to invite them, and it's God's job to lead them. And we want our friends obeying the Lord, not me, Yeah, but it is painful. And so you're right. I think that's a wise word.
Yeah. Well, of course, there's more to say, but I think we've at least adequately discussed a little bit about community and what it looks like. Again, it's not one size fits all, but Jamie, I think you and I would both agree it's safe to say you need other people in your life that are raising support and or have raised full support.
Yeah.
And not just in your life, those are people that you need to take cues from. And be careful. We're not saying divorce yourself of all relationships with people that haven't done that, but be careful what advice you might take or intended words of wisdom. I say intended because they're not from people that haven't raised their full funding before, that haven't walked in these shoes, because I've heard a lot of really well-intentioned bad advice from people about support raising. Sometimes even people that are on support. So you need to be really careful about those we listen to. But anyway, Jamie, as you know, is my intent. I like to give the last word to you. So take us out of this episode, my friend.
Yeah, I think just the thing that I would encourage people is to, again, allow that first community to be Christ, and then secondly, to be who you are and be where you are, and just cultivate the relationships in this season, and understand it's going to be a different season.
Mm-hmm. Good word. Thank you, Jamie, for joining us once again on the SRS podcast.
Yeah, such a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us for this episode. We would love to hear your ideas for future content. Please visit supportraisingsolutions.org/feedback to share your thoughts and questions. Also, wherever you download your podcast from, be sure to subscribe for future episodes and come back each week to gain more insight into the process of building and maintaining your personal support team.